this weekend.
Looks like we'll be going live here in just a few.
Pretty happy with that truck so far.
Yeah, remind me, I remember seeing pictures, but what was it?
It's a 1962 Chevy Stepside.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Grandpa bought it in 1962.
Mm.
In World War.
I bought an airplane that my dad used. Yeah, that's pretty cool. He didn't buy it brand new.
Right.
It's a 47, actually.
It's cool.
It's cool. That's.
Okay, we don't have anybody
Missed out.
online yet.
Yeah. I'm the same way. That's why everybody gives me grief about my King Ranch. Flatbed. And they're like, wait, you have like a farm or ranch? And I was like, well, I just wanted a flatbed. And they're like, well, why? And I said, well, it reminds me of my grandpa's 1972 big Ford flatbed doing. And I remember riding around.
That's in 2000.
Yeah. That's what they do.
Mr. Throgmorton, how are you?
Morning's good.
Mr. Throgmorton.
Morning, AJ. Oh, that's what I think.
It is.
Is it still round?
Exact same spot.
Still round and fly?
Pretty awful.
Oh, it's pretty good.
That's me.
Are you happy?
I'm working on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. Yeah, well, I have a dirt strip up on it, Buff Gateway. So
That's cool.
he built it and then I just keep maintaining it.
No graphic racks. No, that'll be fun.
Are you in yet, or are you just coming in?
I was just coming to fix your speaker because it was muffled.
Oh.
So I'll go listen again.
Okay,
You guys just keep going.
Okay.
okay. Alicia, can you hear us? I don't hear you though.
No, it was nice. We swapped out that fuel tank at 62.
Okay,
and it
sounds
just-
good now.
Oh, it does?
Good.
Okay.
And it sounds great.
All right, all right, Gabe, I think we're live.
Okay,
Well, we are live.
great.
Everything worked.
Do we expect anyone else to join,
AJ was just
virtually?
there.
Is Walker gonna join?
Oh, yeah, AJ was just wandering around.
Okay, we'll wait till AJ comes in. Wait a minute,
Yeah.
we need to. I'll make it. All right, it's 9:05 AM today on November 13th, 2024. And I will call to order this meeting of the Grand County Budget Advisory Board. We'll jump right into our actually, those present are members of the board: Kaufman, Wojtek, Vowles, Throgmorton, Winfield, Hackwell. I'm not sure if Commissioner Walker is going to join us virtually, but we'll move forward nonetheless. And we have a presentation and discussion item, which is review tentative budget items to identify potential recommended budget cuts and other budget balancing considerations for presentation to the county commission. So we have a list of sort of expense requests that have been included in the packets. And I think that this meeting of the BAB is designed to really offer a space for open feedback and input by members of the Budget Advisory Board that have seen all of these expense requests come through. And I think we sort of determined and agreed that, you know, this additional meeting was appropriate to open up that space. As previous Budget Advisory Board meetings, we were pretty focused on receiving these requests and less focused on sort of, you know, offering a recommendation or, you know, input as needed that could be forwarded to the commission for consideration. So I'll hand this off to Stephen to follow up on that concept and see how we're going to sort of guide this discussion.
Yeah, good. And maybe just a little additional context here as well. You know, we all sat together through all of the budget advisory boards. So this is the opportunity not only to look at a short list of what I will call potential opportunities for cutting the budget. But also just to be able to discuss it in broad strokes, what we as the Budget Advisory Board believe would be the next step in communicating to the commissioners. Because now, at this point, now that we've recommended the tentative budget, it's in front of the commissioners. Yes, there's a lot of details and a lot of information you have in your head. So I kind of think today is an idea, not just to look at these line items here, but to help us focus the concentration we want to present to the commissioners, who will then take this to approval step. So again, kind of like just a good focusing of ideas or identifying potential areas to cut in the budget or just to improve the budget. Because as we said, the current status of the budget is we're between $1 and $2 million over budget and the tentative budget level at the general fund level. So we have some opportunities, maybe to save some savings or just cut budget or not approve some of the new position requests. So there's some broad stroke ideas right there, but I think we want to go through the list here. Actually, what I'd like to do, and so I'm kind of going off the ranch right now, but I would like to go around to each person just to say, hey, to answer the question of what are some possible solutions to solve the problem in bringing our budget into balance? And just for today's exercise, just assume we're about 1 million to 2 million off, because right now we've already had some things fall into place. So we just assume we got 1 million or 2 to cut. I hate to use the word cut, but balance, is another way of saying it. So let's just start there. No, this is an open and public meeting. The problem to solve is, how do we get our budget into balance? We've got a $1 or $2 million problem to solve. So just as a, open-ended conversation, then we'll go through this. So let me start with you, AJ.
To guide it, which projections are we going with? I know you ran it on a couple of different times.
Yeah. Great question. We've done some additional math. Kevin Walker, who's not here, but he and I and Gabe have had some pretty heated discussions. I shouldn't say heated, they're not heated, sorry. Spirit, light, in light. I had presented last week an overall -9. And I have found a few, I'm going to call them just nuances in the way I was calculating the budget last week. I was taking the average, a 2 or 3 year average, and then a year-over-year average, and then I was taking those two averages and averaging them. Kevin did point out that when you start taking two averages and then take the average of those two, it really distorts the numbers. So now I've taken a very simple, in fact, I probably have it up right here. I've taken a very simple average right now that just says, here are the years ending, and they also years ending October. Kevin also had an issue that I was taking a December 12-month ending moving total, but we hadn't actually achieved November and December this year. So I moved that 12-month moving to end in October and taking a 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 October 12-month moving average. And then just doing a simple one-time only average, not taking 1, 2, and then taking the average of that. I get this new batch of numbers that actually I feel very comfortable with. It is an improvement. See, we're still down on TRT and tourism, 1.3 on down on tourism, on TRT, 0.8 down on tourism, but a little positive, 2.1 on hospital, 4.3 on sale, 3.6 on restaurant. For a 0.5, 0.5% growth overall. So this does improve our budget situation by about a few $100,000. So that's why I said there's a couple things that have improved our budget shortfall from last week. And a couple others, just for your information, our salaries and benefits. Even considering the new positions, we've shaved a little bit off of that. So our balanced budget problem is starting to help itself just naturally. And I'll present these numbers to the commissioners, Bill, the next time we meet, but Kevin and I are both in agreement with this. I did recognize that, as I meant, averaging two different numbers did skew it to the negative last time, and I don't want to be overly negative, but this appears to be very realistic and very simple. So, sorry, AJ, long.
All good.
Yeah, okay.
Well, then assuming growth has been kind of lackluster or not positive, that is an assumption. I'd be more in favor of balancing it down from the million or 2 million excess. So getting down through these lists of items, if these are proposals, without knowing any specifics of it, I think there's value in reviewing that. The other point I had was, this is more to accounting and time tracking. I'd be curious in being more diligent on some of the departments that are grant funded and, tracking our time with more scrutiny towards the grant funded operations versus what, are coming out of this budget. I think we get a lot of value out of that. That's more of an accounting idea just going forward to next year. And then lastly, from my knowledge, you mentioned covering the additional 1 to 2 million excess out of savings or like the general fund. This is my just lack of knowledge on how we could do that if it were on the table. Is that even really a possibility?
Well, I know one idea that was floated. Out of this list, there are possible one-time expenses or special projects or items that are greater than 1 year that are maybe capital expenses or maybe just not capital, but one-time only things that have a potential to come out of capital funds. And, or come out of savings. But this is why this is a perfect example of what would come out of this meeting. We're not gonna make that decision, but we present these ideas to the commissioners and say, hey, maybe take those one-time special project funds or expense funds out of here. Put them in a special bucket. Maybe that's a use of savings.
Are these proposed cuts that you got here? How many lines?
Actually, so what this was anything that was greater than $1,000 year over year in the budget, anything new or anything unique. So it was just a visual through the long entire budget that was not just, flat year over year. New greater than $1,000 year over year, or like a one-time budget.
What's the total too?
You know what? I didn't even, I could do that. Let's just do that. 2.4 million, 2.5 million.
It's pretty good.
And those are all one time.
But, and some of these are just unique, like even at the very top here, I have the commission's discretionary or legislative consulting. So these really haven't changed, but I even put just things that jumped out that might require some conversation. So if we do have to cut $1 million, we kind of have to look at what is the potential list, and I think this represents that potential list. But I still want to go around here. You've given us 3 points. I like the idea about looking at our funds accounting for grant funds to make sure we're accounting for all this. May not help the budgeting problem, but Bill, I know you're a commissioner. I don't know, but do you have any like broad stroke ideas of what we could consider?
Well, I struggle with new positions across the board. Unless we are going to consider the fact that the assessor needs help. That affects every citizen in this county. It's an area that needs beefed up so that we get these assessments done regularly and we reduce, what am I looking for here? The negative publicity that we all benefit or don't benefit from.
Yeah.
I believe with the recent flooding, it warrants looking at the positions that the planning and zoning and the engineer has. Both of those are gonna help in that situation as well, and I know that we're trying to get the recorder's office up and I believe digitized. Some of those things to me are important asks that affect every citizen in the county, and I can see the value in adding those. To just be adding in departments, if it's not justifiable at this time, I struggle with it, I really do, and I'm just laying out my cards of the same conversation I'll have when we're in the commission meeting, is that this time of the year, it's difficult, and I know that we're looking at raises for elected officials, and we're looking all across the board there, and it's a political football.
Yeah.
So I want to be very careful with it. I'm gonna err on the side of caution and compromise and conservative, rather than growing some of these departments. And I like the fact that this one, you know, I don't remember the position.
Pretrial service.
Pretrial services, at least it's grant funded for 1 year, but we have to look beyond that also, you know, and what the consequences could be. And I want to come back to the fact that if you're on 0.5, and I'd love to have you send me those numbers so I could look at them if
We
possible.
will, they're brand new as of this morning, so
Yeah.
I'll share them with you guys.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that I don't wanna create some new positions, but if we are gonna create them, how are we gonna fund them? Not just pulling out of the savings, because Chris has done a great job of investing our money and we've got a savings account, or that Gabe has, you know, we have a general fund there. Let's put a plan together. Are we putting pressure on economic development? I mean, how are we going to increase the revenue without it costing the taxpayers money to cover these new positions? And that's just my conservative side coming out, because we could throw a tax out. We were just talking about one here a little while ago, but it's not gonna float very well with the public after
Yeah.
what we saw recently at our sister municipality here.
Yep.
So,
Okay, so I hear loud and clear, justifying new positions, and Tess is doing an exercise to score or rank all of those new position or reclasses with the commissioners.
yeah,
So that problem is being, or that solution, not a problem, that solution to that consideration is underway. So I think we really won't discuss that today, new positions here. Okay, Shannon,
I mean, I agree with what Bill said, and I agree with what AJ said, but I'm still, like I said, I don't know what you guys have done. So far, like, I know we're not gonna discuss new positions, but like I said in the last meeting, I think what would help is if you go through and we narrow down what cuts the commission's already doing, right? Like positions wise, that shortens that overall 2 million or whatever. And then have you guys received anything from the departments? Have they already started making cuts?
well, two questions answered. One, there's nothing from the commissioners on what to cut yet. Well, that's why we're trying to focus some ideas or some thought. And two, yes, that's why we started with or when it comes to departments, we started with like a $2.2 million gap last week. I believe, and I hate to say it too boldly, but I think we're almost $1 million off of that from natural causes which come from departments. So we've already got like half of our problem solved just through departments.
and when you say that 2 point or whatever it is million, are you taking into account the $800,000
Yes,
overspend?
800 is already in
that is
there.
in that too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're gonna just assume always that we have an 800,000 overspend baked into it, and then the problem is. the
So we're
excess.
trying to get from, say, 2.2 back to 800,000 is what we're really.
No, we're trying to
looking
get 2.2 to 0. Cause the 800,000's already assumed in there.
So this is the 2.2 is separate from the 800,000. So
Yeah,
if you add that
yeah.
in there, we're
So
really
we're
looking
like
at
$3
$3 million
Yeah.
overbuild if it was
Yeah.
2.2 to
So
begin.
we started with 2.2, I think we're around 1 with a bunch of ideas, so we gotta get that down to 0.
I see. Okay, that clarifies.
While also factoring in new positions and COLA.
Yep. Well, I mean,
That
that's,
little thing, yeah.
yeah, that $1 million includes all of these requests, all the new positions, all the
Okay.
reclasses, even the sheriff. URS contribution, that's part of the $1 million, I'm calling it a problem, but it's really what we're trying to solve for.
Good clarification.
Okay, well, and one other thing. Shan, I want to bring this up. You and I have even talked. But anyway, now it's a public conversation. I think it's natural. We do want to look at this list and ask for everything to be justified. I mean, use a silly example, even a lawnmower. All right, do we really need that new lawnmower? Do we really need that multi-tens of $1,000 lawnmower, well, a Home
That's-
Depot lawnmower?
Well, that's my,
You know, I mean,
it's, or do you need the lawnmower, but you can find a cheaper one.
Yeah,
But either way, it's not my job to dictate what the other departments need to run their
Right.
stuff, right? But if you're gonna go through and we're gonna say one-time purchases that we're gonna go through, we might potentially save to cover those one-time purchases. If you have, like, brought up an example of a lawnmower, right? We highlight these certain things and then let the department head come in and say, this is why I need this. Or write a justification for that after you guys have gone through and highlighted those one-time things. They can add justification in there why they need that, right? It's the same thing as a position request. It's just not an ongoing funding. Instead of us just going through and being like, I don't think they need a loan. Or I don't think they need this, or I don't think they need this. They might, right? And maybe if we've highlighted it as a group, or as you guys or whatever, and you say, okay, this one's excess, this one's this much, I would like a follow-up, right? Why do you need this amount of money for this? And that could help the commission, in my opinion, to be like, okay, yeah, no, this person has justified the cost for this one-time purchase. I agree that we should pull it out of savings for this. And if they're not gonna spend the time to justify those one-time purchases, then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or it could be something that's a one-time purchase that just, it's an obvious need, right? I mean, and I'll, like, for instance, and I'll still come in and justify, but for instance, I'm requesting, I think it was a $15,000 server for camera system. Needs to be updated, new server. It's kind of an obvious, we have to have request, but if you guys need me to come in and, or type an email or whatever to justify why we need that, then I'm happy to do so, and I think it's important. Instead of just going through and being like, cut. And so because you run into the problem where that department says, well, I do need this. And then we come in, we balance the budget. Well, then next year we come in and be like, oh, I need that money back, please. Can you amend the budget? Which is fine if that's what we do, but I just think given the opportunity for the department heads, if you guys have gone through and highlighted certain things, like a $50,000 purchase of this or a $30,000 purchase of that, you highlight those things and be like, okay. Can you give us a little bit information, just more on that one specific item? Because during the budget advisory board, they're going through their entire list and it's quick, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get through it and get out the door. And so, and then you want us to come through and pick what items that we can cut, but at the end of the day, I still have a department and a facility to run. And so I'm still gonna be cautious on what I cut because I still need to run my facility. And then it's left to you guys to come through and be like, no, I don't think.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you give the opportunity for the department head to come in and hit those highlighted areas, justify that one-time purchase before you guys pull it out of savings, I think that's appropriate. And I don't see what's wrong with that.
I think well said, well said.
Or some of these items, like I know that there's a tractor in there somewhere, and the lawnmower we just spoke about, and some like what he was talking, or some of these like capital I mean, some of these expenses I don't think fall into capital expenses, but some of them. To me, clearly, it's almost like we should have two lists here, and maybe I'm wrong, because. I'm pretty sure I saw a tractor on one of them.
Yeah.
And so those things are long-term investments that we need if we're, well, I can't say, do we need them, or are they just? We might need it, or, there's a level there of hoping they can get a new tractor and maybe they can get by another year or two, but. Still, I think they fall into a different category than somebody who's just adding some things into their budget in the hopes that they get a yes out of it, so.
Yeah, I think that the list should definitely be discriminated based on those factors, identify potential capital type expenditure, and I think that there is some green highlighted items in the other document that you prepared, Stephen. I'm not sure if that green highlight on some of these items indicates capital type expenditure or why that is that way.
I can't remember what that was, but
Okay.
Well, I might think, no, they don't really need a new lawnmower this year, and they might not have a lawnmower anymore, and so then we're talking whether it's Osta or the gentleman that does our grounds here, then they no longer have the equipment to do their job, so
Right.
it's a different,
Yeah.
it's a different ask in my mind. when
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, well, I'm making notes. One, I think we do separate just an operational cost versus capital cost, because I think we would look at them differently. And two, I love what you said, because I think it's just natural that anything on here should be justified, and I think the Budget Advisory Board's not gonna call anybody out and say, no, you don't get it, but we are kind of challenging this just because you're the department head, you know best.
That's my thing,
Please,
is that's
yeah.
the point of a budget advisory. Why else are we listening to everybody's budgets and what their explanations are? I mean, we're not gonna agree with everybody's purchases, right? So I think even if, we just give them the opportunity, I'm not telling them they have to cut it, it's not my job to tell them that. But if we give them the opportunity and say, us as a budget advisory board, we didn't necessarily feel comfortable with this number. Can you give us more information just on that specific item? Why is it $30,000 for a lawnmower instead of $6,000?
And I would say, as a follow-up to your comments, Shan, I think, getting that request out for more information from department heads and putting a hard deadline on it. So getting that out soon and putting a hard deadline on it and sort of like putting the onus on them to show that justification within a time frame. So they can show that like it is, important and valuable to them. I think that that's a mechanism that we can use to just kind of give a thumbs up or thumbs down on anything. It's like if you have to respond by this time or it's just not going to be considered.
A really short timeline too. I mean,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
all pressed for time here,
Right.
especially you and Steve, and
And my thing is it shouldn't be overly complicated, right? We're the biggest or the largest expense items that are one-time purchases. Capital or your inventory. And so they basically just have to go through those two things because anything over $5,000, as per what I was told, goes into capital, right? It's a one-time purchase over $5,000 goes into capital. Anything that has some kind of like, I can auction it off, that gets used to get the sticker, the Grand County sticker would go into inventory. That's the 800. So like chairs, office equipment, stuff like that, computers. That come out of the 800, but it was less than that $5,000 purchase. But the big ticket items that we're gonna be talking about, and I know we still need that clarification on the capital side, they're probably gonna be in that capital expense. It's the list that we really need to look at, that one-time purchase capital expense that's over $5,000, because if you go through professional and technical, you're gonna start getting into the waters of this is an ongoing expense, it's a contract, I have this payment, I have this payment, I have this payment. And so, but I think your biggest, or those big ticket items, they are one-time expenses are gonna be in your capital account. They should be, in my opinion.
And then one more thing, sorry, Stephen, is that I think that also this brings up the idea that there's a lot of room for improvement and refinement in this process of gathering requests. I know Bill has mentioned sort of creating expectations based on what our actual revenues are. Very valid point. I think also just, we can front load a lot of this by just asking people to come up front with all the information. I think we took a step this year doing that, and I think we can take another step next year, and I think that this board can meet early, prior to budget season, June, July, and other parts of the year. But anyway, this board can meet in particular to prepare for how we approach requests, and we can agree as a board that this is the way we want to see these requests come in, so that we can be in the position as we go along to really refine and ask for more information.
And something that I see, and I don't think that it's even on this list here, but almost every department across the board has increased travel. Everybody's wanting to go more and more and more, and I think that the timing's not good for that. The timing is to consider, you know, let's do our 1 or 2 conventions a year, or whatever, or is there a political reason to be there? But there's an awful lot of travel money in this budget, a lot.
Without much ROI documented for it too. It's kind of like a convention, well, because we have to, or because you always have, or want to, but where do we get the return?
And on a law enforcement standpoint, and I can speak, obviously I have a bias towards it, but, all law enforcement, if you're LE, I'm required to do a certain amount of hours of training. I asked for posts, I have 40 hours of training. And so if I can't do it in-house, I have to send people out. And they have to get that training, so that's why we do like the sheriff's conference or these other conferences, because it's a big enough training where I can take enough people to be like, okay, you're getting your hours in. And so I'm just on that standpoint, that's why usually our travel budget and our training budget's usually larger, is because I'm required by state statutes to train these guys.
Well, that's the,
The training is totally separate, really, in my mind. If,
yeah,
I mean, we know that Gabe's getting more education. I don't know what Chris is. That's a whole different,
yeah,
in my mind, that's a justifiable travel.
if it's required, the required is.
Well, and it's also benefiting the county.
Right.
There's a benefit that comes from this, from these
Yeah.
trainings, but to travel, to be traveling to, I don't know,
Okay, I did want to follow up though, because we are gonna separate expense items from capital, and capital really is defined greater than $5,000, that the life of the tangible object is greater than 1 year. So that's really how we're gonna kind of separate the
Right, you
stuff
have
from
the
here.
2
whether it's-
capital line items, right? You have capital projects and then you have capital equipment.
Yeah. So if it meets that category, greater than $5,000, the useful life greater than 1 year. You know, then we'll start to separate.
And like I said, and I think it would be like AJ brought up, with the grants wise, a lot of those capital, big ticket capital items do have a grant attached to them.
Good.
And so we just need to look at that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be approved, because like Bill said, just because. I mean, the problem is if you give up that grant, you might not get it again the next year, but do you need it right now? Because that ties $70,000 up for the year. Because most grants are, you know, reimbursed grants, you know, I have to cover that 70, or I have to cover the whole amount, and then I get 70% back, right? And then like for SAR, right, then they take that other 30% and they turn it back into SAR reimbursement. But that still takes $50,000 out of the general fund for that year that nobody else can use.
Okay,
So, but that I would look at and see, do we need this? Yes, just because it's a grant, do we actually need it?
yeah,
I just, sometimes we get into the habit of, well, we got a grant. We better do it because we might not get it. It's like I told the commission with this position, right? I mean, I got a grant. It's still up to you guys to decide on the position. I can always call the state back and say, just kidding. And I can take their money back, but at the same time, it's up to you guys to decide to tie that money up.
yeah. Okay, well, I want to keep going around. Chris?
Sure. I think the first thing I would mention is that, having been through a lot of the budgets and on the budget advisory board for a long time, it's really good to have the options that we have. Because in the past, when the fund balances were much lower, it was, there weren't as many options available to us, and it was much more, you know, cuts have to happen, these things, and it was just, more difficult, I would say. So I think that the the way that the county has budgeted has led to increasing fund balances, which is a good thing, and it puts us in a position where we are right now, where we have some options, which is, I think, really nice, and just to keep that in mind is a good thing. One of the ideas for county government, like if you, look at some of the rules that are in place for it, and sort of the general philosophy is that the county is sort of on a pay-as-you-go philosophy, that the state of Utah wants all counties to be that way. Meaning that you're not, taking property tax from the citizenry for no, specified intent and purpose. And that's why there's limits on your general fund balance, and that's why, your capital projects funds and other funds ought to have, projects that you're planning to do with them. And that ties into sort of the idea of, if we start using savings to pay for, ongoing things, in general, like as a budgeting philosophy, that always raises a red flag, right? Because eventually you're gonna run out if you keep doing that, if your revenue starts going up. On the other hand, we shouldn't be just accumulating a lot of money, without a specified purpose. So those two things are kind of, you have to balance them to some extent. When we talk about taking one-time items out of the budget, I think that makes sense, but we have to keep in mind that there's always one-time items, right? There will be time, but there's always going to be more one-time items next year.
Yeah.
So it's not like next year there won't be any of them.
There'll be a whole nother
It's
list.
gonna be a whole nother list. But I'm not necessarily opposed to using capital projects funds for that, or savings for that, for the reason that I just mentioned, which is that those funds have to be used for something at some point. But the only source of revenue that the county really has control over is property tax. So if you do get into a situation where you're depleting your savings and you're headed towards a property tax increase at some point. But that's not the way that the county has been budgeting, for the last at least 10 years has been, just in general, increasing fund balances. I will say that, the last property tax increase that the county did do was because the county got pretty far behind on employee compensation, and a salary survey was done, and morale was in the basement for county employees. Recruitment and retention was difficult, and we got into a position where the county decided to raise property taxes to cover those increases. And that's why I think that doing the COLAs is important to keep us out of that situation, to at least try to keep employees up with inflation so that we don't run into that same position. Because that was very difficult on everybody.
When was that, do you know?
I want to say,
19?
yeah,
18 or 19.
I think that decision was made in 18, and then it happened in 19 or 19 and 20 and something.
Yeah.
And I guess the only reason I ask is because our COLA chart shows that from the year 2020 through 2025, if we approve the 2.5, will be just under 24% increase that we've seen in employee salaries just based off of the COLA. Which is substantial. We're not seeing that in other, out in the private sector for sure. So it's, there's a balance there. I certainly don't want to see increasing property taxes to continue funding in the future just for salaries, but there's been some substantial growth in salaries here from the year 2020 through 25. So that's basically 5% a year is what the average is.
I'm just gonna suggest that's a commissioner discussion rather than something I wanna have in this meeting today, but.
Yeah. So,
And on the underspend, I'd really like to see data on that. I know you're working on it, Gabe.
Yeah.
Because the other thing to think about is if we're, if our original budget, the one we're working on right now is $800 in the red, or $800,000 in the red, but we come out at the end of the year in positive, then, you know, it's over 800,000, but that, which is the difference between where we started and where we ended up. And since we've been doing that for a number of years, but continuing to add to the fund balance, I'm interested in seeing numbers on that to kind of get a handle on that.
And statute actually allows for up to 5% of the fund balance to be factored into balancing the budget. Which would actually put this budget, you know, statutorily, we would be allowed to even go up to $1 million there is my, at first calculation. And so I'm prepared to offer an updated analysis that potentially could support for commission consideration, budgeting $1 million in the red rather than 800.
And for me, the idea there is we want to be realistic with the budget, because again, we don't want to be, you know, accumulating funds for no particular reason. And our idea should be in general pay as you go, and I think being realistic there is a good idea, and being, you know, upfront about where we know we're gonna end up at the end of the year, most likely. But we do want to also factor out any, you know, major, you know, funding that came in from COVID funds and that kind of stuff.
Well, you mentioned, you know, that we don't want to be building up funds for no apparent reason, but
Right.
yet I do know that there's a capital projects list that's going around that has some very big reasons on what
Absolutely.
that money could be spent on. So in reality, I think people are already thinking, how do we spend some of that money? So
Absolutely.
I don't think that we want to forego continuing to at least keep a rainy day cushion there rather than finding a way to spend all that money down.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I come out of, you know, let's be realistic about where our budget is at, and if we want to add to it, then by all means, we can do that, but I think it's better to, I'd prefer to do that intentionally rather than just have to consider the outcome of our process.
Yeah.
So, but to your general question, I think I need more information on certain items before I can say, yeah, we're at the point where we should take out a savings from here. I'd like to see what the commissioners say on different new positions they want to add. Some data on that underspend would be great. And, you know, where we come out on, you know, which items really are capital expenses that we can pull out. What other things are we calling one time that probably are gonna have just be replaced by other one-time expenses.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't come down firmly on, you know, exactly how it should happen, and that's definitely a commission decision.
Let me pose the question actually to the group. If we do find capital expenditures here, whether it's inventory, equipment, long-term, short-term, whatever, but it meets the category of capital and it's in the general fund, we could choose to take that out of the capital on 34, right? And that would help this problem.
Right.
General fund problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Gabe?
Yeah, I think there's been some good conversation about lines like travel, or like the tractor example, it would come to like fleet vehicles. And I think that that's another kind of sneaky way that the expense requests kind of creep up. I feel like there's probably 100K in here of new fleet vehicle requests. And I don't know, I guess I don't feel like we have any real nailed down way of assessing or analyzing that other than maybe requesting more information, because I think it is really important to understand if it's just an annoyance for staff to have to deal with a vehicle that's a little older or clunkier, or if it's actually a safety issue, or if it's just something that's critical that's not getting done because that vehicle isn't available. Because I think everyone can relate to the idea of like, you know, your car, maybe you have your car paid off and you can roll with it for a few more years, and
Totally.
maybe you don't want to drive cross country in it, but it still gets you to work every day. And so I guess we have to really think about it in that real basic way. Yeah, I think just in a broad stroke, like I kind of always have curiosity about about airport and OSTA sort of being departments that are growing, that certainly there's support for. But the expense requests kind of always seem to come in, and I just want to make sure that we're thinking about it holistically and how we're growing those areas and departments. And yeah,
Sitting on the airport board, I struggle justifying another position there when we're seeing that we've cut back to 2 flights a day and our enplanements are considerably lower from last year. And so, you know, as you say, the airport and OSTA both, those are, we've got to be careful there because we're not seeing an increase. We're actually seeing a decrease there. It might be different at OSTA. I know there's plans of a archery underway right now, which I'm not sure what that's gonna involve, and then they wanna build pickleball courts, and there's a lot of money being planned on being
commitment.
spent out there. And
yeah,
how much of that is grant and how much of it is out of the county's pocket?
right.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, even like USU, there's the USU Extension Office is asking for, you know, increased staffing. And, you know, I think that's one of those situations where initially I'm like, that's not really like even in our house. What responsibility do we have? But on the flip side, I mean, it is a service that's direct to the community, and also it's one of those partnership type opportunities where they're providing a facility, they're providing the offices for the staff to work out of, and they're also paying for like half of the compensation for those employees. So that's always really attractive to me when we're not footing the entire bill for services to the community. But you know, that initially is like really kind of hard for me. Because of how little control and oversight we have over that, you know, that office. But you know, I've really liked from when I started with the county and the person that was running it then, and from where it is now, I really liked seeing where it's gone.
You're
So-
talking USU.
Right, yeah. Mhm. And yeah, I mean, let's see, you know, there's certain efforts that I think that there's a consensus that we want to prioritize flood response and mitigation and any efforts regarding flood. I think the community wants to see that, and I think that you know, the legislative body, you know, wants to see that supported. I'm curious to see how the emergency management department, how that interplays, and how their you know, how their expense requests respond directly to that imminent concern in the community. Or if that's, you know, yeah, that's a hard thing. You never want to undercut emergency management, because when an emergency happens, you don't want to have to look back and say, oh, we you know, we didn't fund that part of it, and that could have made us more prepared. So it's a really tricky one, I think. The one-time capital expense element of discriminating this list, I see is pretty important and elemental to this discussion. And then just the overline bottom line impacts of these lists as we refine them, just so we have an idea of like where this is going to get us. Yeah, I think like broad strokes, and you know, I only have a couple lines that I just kind of like flat out have a problem with. And I don't know if we're going to get to that type of discussion, but I think broad strokes, that's really all I have for the moment.
Yeah,
Like what?
Oh, like recycling at the airport. I just want to kick that out of the window. Sorry, Tim.
I just wanted to pile on what you said there. I've already got personal ideas about this list, and I know we're not gonna get time to do this today, so I'm gonna actually ask us kind of a homework assignment for you guys to go through this list. Because this list was created by those one-time or greater than $1,000 year-over-year spend or unique things. And I'm already developing a theme here that this list needs to be resubmitted to department heads, not, you know, as a challenge to just add a little more justification.
What is today's Wednesday, right?
Yeah,
With a response by Friday or Monday, I mean, we don't wanna,
When do you guys have to put this out to the public?
what's that?
When does this have to go to the public?
We have workshops on Monday and Tuesday with the commission.
as an FYI, I've already scheduled a meeting with Tammy at the airport and Angie at OSTA, because I've already got several ideas that need to be challenged. So I'm actually going up to Angie and Tammy and say, hey, we need to look over these one more time and see what. Help, rank them, or something. So I'm already starting with that.
Did we send the voluntary tightening?
Yes.
Out to
Yes.
department heads to be
Yes.
responsive?
That's why a lot of the natural reduction has happened from that.
So it did get responses.
Yes.
They did get
Yep.
tightening.
A lot of great responses, either pure cutting or ideas for, like Cora Phillips wants to add new emergency management. She said, hey, maybe we should talk to the city, see if they'll share half of it, I mean, just ideas, not, but, in fact, the guy got a whole list of ideas. So here, to actually add on to what, going full circle, I think my number one thing is just that, and I think everybody said it, but I'll repeat it. A second justification for these expenses. A silly example, we've already talked about it, if you've got a piece of equipment that you need to replace. Well, there's gotta be some kind of rule that says, all right, show me how this piece of equipment really will not last for another year, Just to kind of a second set of eyes, or because if anybody left without any kind of challenge, we would just say like, yeah, I'd like a piece of equipment. Cause I hate taking this to the shop, once a month, but maybe we gotta take it to the shop for once a month.
Is that a lesson learned for next go round too? Whereas the department heads came in and my thinking was they're gonna ask for what they think they need and want. Why wouldn't they ask for more knowing they'll probably get dropped? But to do a little more scrutinizing in those calls while the heads are sitting through these.
Gabe, what's the 228,000? See details below, and I don't see details.
Oh, sorry, who is that?
Looks
Yeah,
like that's the
what's it
airport, I think that's specifically the airports.
And that is, yeah,
Capital
there's a
project
separate, if
list.
you look at that particular proposed budget one sheeter, that's what that refers to, and I didn't. So you'd have to go open up that airport or whatever that department's proposed budget to see that long list.
And yeah, I think
But
that,
everything on that list right there is precisely what I'm talking about, a secondary.
Yeah, but where is
challenge
that
about-
list? I guess I'm
Oh,
not.
I can show you where, I can show you where it is, but it's in our budget folder under the
Oh,
proposed,
okay.
the one
But it's
pager.
not in today's.
No, it's
agenda.
not in.
Okay.
There's a couple of those that say C list below, and then we have to refer to their proposed one budget.
Well, I was just looking through
Yeah.
for the big numbers and that.
Yeah.
Stuck out without an explanation.
But, so given that we do just have 5 minutes, I would like you all just to take, I can resend this out just as a link, so you don't have to go to the agenda here. And even link to those one pagers, so if it does say see the list, you can look at it. I've already got a pretty good idea of what should be challenged from this list. You could all just take another look and just reply an email. Hey, here's some things that, kind of look like could be challenged, but I like how Sean said it. Doesn't mean we're proposing that this is cut, but justification, so.
Well, I think some help from Gabe too, in the capital stuff, if we want to really look at those, if they're necessary, I do think you need to go to the departments to get justification. Do we need a tractor this year, or is it a?
Nice want to have, nice.
Yeah, sure, I mean, I want a new tractor too, but.
and that's,
Steve, I have a question.
Yeah.
Has anybody gone back to look at revenue items other than taxes, property tax or sales taxes, just to make sure, just
Other
another,
fees. you mean?
yeah, just another look to say, have we been realistic with all of these as well?
Right.
Because that's the other, the other side to the budget.
Sure.
That's,
Yeah.
there's that revenue that comes in, it doesn't cover the entire jail, right, but. Just with the IPP program for housing those state inmates, we receive over $200,000 a year just to those 8 inmates. And then we get COP money that comes in from the state, felony probation money, and so there's revenue coming in. So I think if you're gonna look at like taxes and everything, you look at the totality of everything. So
And I think we can be as realistic as possible with those revenue streams.
Yeah.
Because, if we're off a little bit, we're not, it's not gonna be the end of the world, especially on those smaller ones.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done, with estimating property tax and other things, or just try to be as realistic as possible, look back at, what's happened and try to get it as accurate as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what I'm gonna do with this list, with your help on just passing feedback to me or to us through email. Is to create a couple different lists, like a capital expenditure list that may be treated a little differently than general funds. Another list of just a short list of items that could be challenged and be justified, rejustified. And then these lists can maybe become shorter and shorter, so when we go to the commissioners, it may make their job a little easier than just starting from scratch on this.
Just a process suggestion, if you're gonna create workbooks, separate ones that send out to it, you would just throw columns in there for like AJ's comments, Bill's versus just requesting us to email you back. But
That's a great idea. Let me just put columns for you
Yeah.
guys, and it's just
Right,
type it
because
right in.
AJ may say the same thing that I'm gonna say, and
You
I
can
don't
say,
have to,
ditto
I'm hitting
AJ.
the same email over and over again. I may just look at that and put in there what AJ said.
I can.
Dave, could you give me the times of the two workshops you mentioned, so I don't blow that?
1 PM on Monday, we'll have the Board of Canvassers first. They'll be fairly short with the workshop right after that. And then pre-commission meeting on Tuesday, so I think we'll do a 2 PM start time.
2 PM, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right,
are we assuming the airport recycling is getting recycled? That's always my question with recycling. Can you track what actually goes into a glass
Yeah.
refinement versus a
Well,
landfill?
I had that, had the very evil idea of just putting the recycle sticker on one and just throw it in the trash. I mean,
Feel good about it.
I could do that for about $8. So, that is a joke for everybody, that's just.
And actually just one other item, and I'll put it in my comments, but the judge asked for an education reimbursement, and that one is interesting because, I myself in the past couple of years have looked at options for, potentially pursuing the education reimbursement as an elected, and I've actually determined that for me to feel comfortable even putting that request in, I think that we would need to adjust policy to be very clear and that electeds would be included as part of that benefit. And I tend to think that the same sort of policy change would be needed to include the judge in that. So, as policy is currently written, I'm not saying I don't support the judge's effort, but I just don't think our policy supports us paying for the judge's education.
We need to look at the policy is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's really that then is kind of a request for the county attorney almost. It's a legal issue, isn't it?
yeah, I would think, they would
Well,
definitely need to review it.
A legal review.
Cause my thing is with the judge, the justice court judge, it's. They fall into an elected category, but they're not elected, they're appointed, right? And so
Right.
it's just this weird in between. You guys are clearly elected to where she was appointed to the position, but it's this weird,
Yeah.
so she's still technically, like I said, kind of an employee. She just kind of falls on that more elected side.
Right.
So the judge is different than just a standard elected than like you three. And so
Sure.
you would have to look at that. You know what I mean? It's just like she put in there for her raise, which she's justified in it's state statute. You guys have to do it, right?
Mhm.
But it's, like I said, there's, judges are different than just a standard elected. Yes, they're put on a ballot for retention, but they're not running against anybody, right?
Yep.
Right.
Okay, all right, well, to follow up with our assignment, I'm going to put columns for each of you in here to put your comments. I actually love that idea because I'm gonna fill out my comments in there as well. We can all read each other's comments, and maybe that triggers additional thought or, whatever. But I think by Friday, I know it's assumed, but Friday close of business, let's try to have our comments in here about those areas that have opportunities for, as we're calling, just to be re-challenged or re-justified or justified. Then that will give us more focused concentration as we meet with the commissioners next week, even that alone. And I'll try to help summarize or prioritize this list to a shorter list for the commissioners to digest. Very good.
Yep, I thought this was very useful.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Especially the education from both you and Chris up there. I mean, it helps me when we get those nuances,
Mhm.
so.
No, I appreciate you guys doing this. I don't feel like an alternate juror. Sit through the whole process and say, thank you, we'll figure it out.
Okay, so I think that we'll just, I had put an action item that in the agenda just to make clear if we wanted to take specific action. It seems like we have sort of working action plan that we all agree on, so I think that we can kind of leave that lie as far as amending or renewing any specific recommendation at this time. And so I will go ahead and, unless there's an objection, I would go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 10:02.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Where's the,
For
do
taking
you know
notes
where
over there.
the code is on the 5%?
Yeah, I can forward it.
Okay.
Mhm.